Welcome to Rick Rack Ruby. I'm Laura Cluvo. Today we will be making this Snow Baby ornament, which features the Pixie Noel 2 fabric collection and is the first in my baby's first Christmas ornament series. It's fun and easy, so let's get started. To make the snowman ornament, we will start with the pattern. I will describe it for you quickly. It's 5 inches tall, 2.5 inches wide. It goes straight across at the top, comes down 1/4 inch, and then just gently curves around. I folded it in half to make sure that, it's fairly symmetrical. And anyway, I'm using this pattern just to cut out my iron-on interfacing. This is just kind of a lightweight interfacing, and I'm going to iron it on to the back, or I guess the front and the back are the same, of this 100% wool felt. Okay, so I'm going to fuse this and cut it out, and I'll be right back. This is the right side, and this is the interfacing side. And first thing I want to do is embroider the face. The most important thing about the face is to remember to put it low. So I always draw a line across the center. We need to make the face tight, so it's low and the features are close together. By the time we, stuff it, stitch it together and stuff it, it's 3-dimensional, so we're gonna lose a lot from the sides. And then the hat comes down pretty low. That looks really cute if the hat is low. Sometimes I'll also make a approximate center line, but you don't have to do that. Anyway, so I'm gonna make these little sort of triangle eyes like this, and then some little eyebrows above. The eyebrows are about on the halfway, and then a little carrot nose in the middle. And then I have different options for the mouth, but I think I'm just going to do this little fly stitch mouth like this, which I'll show you in red, and then blush the cheeks. So this is about what the face is going to look like. Begin with 2 strands of black floss for the eyes. So I'll come up here at the bottom and then insert my needle at the top, and then over here. See, I'm just making like an upside down V. And then that little space in the middle right now, it looks purple, but this is a disappearing marker and the purple won't show. So I just kind of want to fill in that space in between those 2 stitches. That looks about right. And then again, I'm just going to reinsert my needle at that top point. So that's 3 stitches for the eye, and then just a straight stitch for the eyebrow. I like the eyebrows to be high and a slight angle outward like this. It's a little bit more whimsical that way, and that's all there is to it for the eye. I'm going to secure the thread in the back. I'm not going to go across. And one of the important reasons why I like to have interfacing on the back like this is so that the stitches don't show through to the front. I'm just going to stitch through a few times to secure my thread, and then I'll repeat for the second eye. Okay, I'm just going to do the same thing for the second eye. So just a little angle here. Again, my needle is bent. And then an angle over here. That looks about right. That might be too wide. Let's see. That looks okay. And then I'm going to fill in the center. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you do want the eyes to be approximately the same, but they don't have to be exactly the same. Okay, and then the eyebrow, again, a little bit up above the eye. That looks about right. And then out at an angle like that. Cute. Okay, I'm going to secure this on the back, and then I'll thread my needle with 2 strands of orange for the carrot nose. I'm using DMC Floss number 608 for the orange, but I don't think it's that important. You can choose whatever shade you like. Now I'm going to just run a series of satin stitches just from one side to the other, tapering down to a point to make the shape of a carrot. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to have the suggestion of a carrot. It doesn't have to be exactly perfectly perfect. That's cute. It's kind of a small carrot. You could make it bigger, but that's good enough. I think I just did about 7 stitches. And just secure that on the back. And I realized that this project doesn't use any glue. So I put my glue gun away. I think this mouth might be a little bit too low since I made such a small nose. So I think I'll just pull it up a little bit like this. I think that might be better. I'm going to thread my needle with 2 strands of red floss. I know it's a little distracting to have that second purple line there, but remember, it's disappearing marker and it'll be gone by the time I finish the project. All right, so I'm doing a fly stitch. So I came out at one end of the mouth and went back in at the other end of the mouth. And then before I pull that tight, I'm actually going to make another stitch from the center here, and I'm going to catch. See how I caught that? This is called a fly stitch. And then I'm going to go back in just below the first thread, and that's all there is to it. Just a little V. Oh, that's so cute. It's a little off center. I like that. So I'm going to secure that in the back. Later on, we're going to blush the cheeks, and that always adds a lot to the face, but I don't want the blush to rub off on the backing fabric when we actually sew this together, so I'm going to wait to do that at the end. Now we're going to do our patchwork on the front of the body. The first thing I want to do is just draw a straight line across this center right here. And then another line about 1/4 inch below that. It doesn't have to be perfect. The idea is now I'm working with the Pixie Noel 2 collection, and I just have some small pieces. I have this one with the little stockings, I have white with the blue dots, and I have pink with these little snow globes. So the first piece I'm going to use is this white with the blue dots, and I'm going to put it on this lower line, pin it, then I'm going to stitch across so that it'll be 1/4 inch. It'll be right here at that first line that I drew, and I'll press it and I'll be right back. Okay, here's my first fabric, and I did dab a little bit of water on there to get most of the purple ink to release. Now this is important. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and trim this all even with the edge here. This way there's a little bit more waste than I would like, but I want it to be really clear for you to understand what is happening. So on one side, which I'm going to choose this side, which is my right, but it's the snowman's left. So I'm going to measure from the top, and right here to here, I want to be 1/2 inch. So I'm looking at that 1/2 inch mark right here to here, 1/2 inch. And make a little mark. Then over here on this edge, I want 1 3/4. So right here. And I'm going to mark it right here. And then I would draw a line from here to here and cut it. So this is for your top. Like I say, this is a lot of waste, and honestly, I just want to make sure it's really clear what's happening. Then for my second piece, I want the stockings, like if I went like that, they would be sideways, right? So I'm going to use a little bit bigger piece and place it inside here. We're done with this. And I can tell that I need to move it up a little bit so that I can see at least, you know, some of the feet. Okay, I think that's about right. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this edge off right here. The stockings are kind of in rows. Doesn't have to be perfect. Oh, I would like to get that holly in there. So it's going to be about like this, so I can see some of the feet. And then my third piece is going to be at this kind of an angle, so some of those might be cut off. But anyway, for now, I'm going to just go with this, and I know it's not going to be perfect. I'm going to draw along that line onto the stocking print fabric, and this wouldn't matter if you didn't have a directional print. And then I'm going to cut that off at that same angle and then turn it up like this and then stitch it and then fold it back. I'm aiming to get this little blue toe to show. We'll see. We'll see, but that's the objective. So I'm going to stitch straight along this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, fold it back, press it, and then I'll probably go ahead and just trim around with the edge again. Okay, there we go. I like the way that the stockings are straight up and down. I like the way the little blue one shows. And now for the last piece of patchwork, we're just going to measure 2 inches down this side. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to avoid, you know, 90-degree angles. Okay, so from here, from that corner, 2 inches is here. And then I'm just going to connect this point over to here. And remember, we do have that seam allowance, so there'll be a little bit more showing at the bottom. I'll explain that better in a second. So now I'm going to just cut this off. So what I mean is that when you put the next piece down, it comes up a 1/4 inch from here, so that there will be a little bit more showing on the bottom. Now the little snow globes on this are so spaced out, they're so far apart from one another that you really have to think, if you want to use this fabric, you can use a different one, of course. I really like to think about, like, what can I do to get the snow globe to show? This is not going to work. Let's see. I'm working with fat quarters, and I'm just going to try to get this this snow globe here to land somewhere in that bottom section. I've also made these where the snow globe was in the middle and then the stockings were on the bottom, and that works just as well. This one also has a different mouth, but I wasn't that crazy about that one. I think it's a little bit cuter this way. Okay, so now let's see how this works. I'm going to set this like this, and I think we're going to be good. And this entire snow globe is going to be showing. So I will place this here, pin it, stitch it, flip it, press it, and trim it. There we go. Now I'm going to just stitch around the edge, around just this bottom part, to make sure that these pieces aren't, especially this one, isn't flapping around and getting in the way. Now I've stitched around the edge. You can see that here. And I threaded my machine with pink. I'm going to do 3 rows of decorative stitching. I'll do a blanket stitch across the top, then a feather stitch here. This is all pre-programmed into my Bernina. Then I'm going to do sort of like a double zigzag or a triple zigzag. It's, you know, just goes back and forth like that. I like to put the heavier stitches down at the bottom of the project. Now, your machine probably has decorative stitches. Maybe you've never, you know, used them, but it is really fun to try something new. So if your machine has like numbered stitches, that's probably what they are, is these decorative sort of embroidered stitches. So I'll come back after each one and show you what they look like. My blanket stitch, it's kind of like a double blanket stitch. It goes back and forth over each stitch so that it looks a little bit extra heavy. And I like that because it's right at the top edge and it forms sort of a border for the patchwork. Also, it's important to make sure there's like a bar. Let's call this the bar and then call this like the teeth. And I like the teeth to go down and the bar to be at the top. So the next stitch is going to be a feather stitch right along this seam. There's my little feather stitch. The center of the stitch is along the seam, and then the little strokes or the little, I don't know, leaves, I don't know what they are to either side of the seam. And now this last one will be my triple zigzag. And I'm gonna bring the zigzag, instead of having the center of it along the seam, I'm gonna place it inside. See the seam allowance? You can kind of see that seam allowance right there. It's like extra white for about 1/4 of an inch. I'm gonna try to get the stitch right along there so that the edge of the stitch is on the seam instead of the center of the stitch. There's my little triple zigzag. And, you know, you could always do hand embroidery, but, you know, I was like the fastest, easiest way to do anything. But hand embroidery would be great there. Okay, I think that the front of the snowman is done. Now, this is fun. For the back, I'm actually using a section of sweater. So I went to the thrift store, I got this sweater, and originally I thought that I would be using the hem and the cuffs for the hat, and I actually tried quite a few. I tried to work this in as the hat. Can you see the ribbing there? But it was a disaster. I will show you. I don't know. This one was too big. I actually made the pattern a lot smaller after I did this one. I don't know, it just wasn't that cute. So I did use the sweater for the back, and I like that because I like the way there's a little bit of fuzz showing around the edge. And because the sweater is stretchy, there's a lot of like plumpness. Here, let's use the real one. I made so many of these trying to get it just right for you guys. You know, there's a lot of plumpness in the back, and then the front kind of stays more flat, which I like that. And then also, if you see it from the front, there's like a little halo of the fuzziness from the sweater. I also kind of like, even though my pattern is symmetric, of course, this one, when I sewed it, it went a little wonky at the bottom there. And of course, I kind of like that. See what I mean? Okay, here's one that it's the smaller size, but I used the sweater for the hat, and I put the face too big and too high. So I did not like that. That is not good. But what was my point? Oh, my point was, so again, I tried to use the cuff for the hat, and it was just a failure. It's just a lot cuter to use fur for the hat, and that's what we're going to do today. It can be any sweater. It can be any fiber content, whatever you like. I'm just going to set it down like this and sort of cut around it. There we go. And then with a very small seam allowance, 1/4 inch, I'm going to stitch right sides together, and I try to keep the sort of like the grain or the weave of the sweater up and down. And again, you can use a wool sweater, acrylic sweater, any kind of sweater. This is definitely a synthetic of some kind, but I don't want you to have to go on a mission to find a specific sweater. Any sweater, white, off-white, whatever, it'll work. Then remember to leave this top edge open. So I'm going to stitch all the way around to here. And it's very important to backstitch here and here, so that when you turn it and you're stuffing, those stitches don't come loose. I will pin it and stitch around here, and then I'll trim all this excess sweater out of the way, and then I'll be back. My seam allowance is pretty close, but I am going to trim a little bit off the bottom and maybe clip into these inner curves. Now I will turn it to the right side. And remember, I did do some back stitching at the beginning and the end, just to be sure that that seam would stay while I was turning and stuffing. Having the stretchy sweater as the backing really makes turning easier. You could see how easy that was. Okay, I'm having a look. Looks pretty smooth. I like that. That looks good. Great. Nothing to it, right? Now I'm going to stuff it. I like this Polyfill Ultra Plush stuffing. Don't overstuff. If your sweater is really stretchy, it's easy to overstuff. So keep watching it, you know, from the front to make sure that you just have a nice smooth shape. And don't keep, you know, shoving the stuffing in there just because you can. You can see how easily I can reach in there, and this opening is plenty big enough. This is really just kind of a pleasure to make. There's no struggle so far. Okay, I'm going to continue stuffing it. You don't need to watch that. Now I have a doubled strand of hand quilting thread. And I'm going to just gather around the top, all the way around, like around the circle. And I'm going to secure my thread by stitching through the felt right on the edge there. If I try to secure my knot in the sweater part, it'll just come right through. So I'm just doing a little running stitch all the way around, keeping that stuffing tucked in. It's about 1/4 of an inch down from the edge. And I'm just going to go all the way, just like that. It's easier to see on the felt. I'm back to where I started. So I'm going to tuck in those seam allowances while I pull tight on this. It doesn't have to be perfect. Remember, there's a hat that's going to go over this and cover all this, so it does not have to be neat or perfect. Those are the best kinds of designs. Now you can see, remember how low I made my features below the halfway? And see how it looks now? It almost looks high, right? So that's why it's important to keep those features low. And then I'm going to knot off my thread with a French knot. I'll wrap it 3 times and then reinsert it. And it already popped through. I'll do another one just to be sure. And again, this will be hidden by the hat. Great, that looks cute. I like it. Now for the hat, I have cut 1.5 by 5.5 inches of this plush fur. I got this fur from an Etsy seller. I've tried all kinds of fur, and this fur is really soft. It feels like I'm petting a kitten. And when I cut it from the back, it didn't shed at all. It was a miracle. I'm also using the selvage right here, so that this part is going to go here, so that I can just be assured of a nice clean edge right there, like that. All right, so I will machine stitch the 2 short ends together. And this is a generous length, so I'm not too worried about my seam allowance. I would say that I'm going to do a little more than 1/4 of an inch. Here's how it looks. This is the seam. This is actually the inside. See how fluffy the seam is? Now if I turn it to the right side, I'm going to place that seam at the back, and I'm just going to try it on to make sure it's tight enough. Okay, feels pretty good. Here's how it will look. Now I'll gather up this top edge, making sure that this selvage is at the bottom. And again, I'm using a doubled strand of quilting thread. I'm starting in the seam allowance from the back seam, and your stitches don't have to be neat or small. Just go around with nice big sloppy stitches. It'll be fine. Go all the way around to where you began. Okay, so now I've gathered this up. It's pulled nice and tight, and I will go through and secure my thread. I'm still working on the inside of the hat. Now sometimes I will add a little bit of stuffing. Yeah, I'm gonna add a little bit of stuffing. Because the hat is just kind of perched on the top of the head. You want to make sure you don't obscure the features. So tip the hat back. See, like from the side how it goes at an angle like this? And then I'm going to rethread my needle with a double strand of quilting thread, and I'm going to tack it all the way around. I've pinned the hat at the back to make sure that that seam stays there in the back, and at the front to make sure that the hat doesn't fall too far forward. But by the way, I have actually trimmed the fur in some cases if I felt like it, you know, covered up too much of the face. And then I also want to be sure that when I'm stitching the hat, that I'm not so close to the edge that I'm only stitching through the fur. I want to make sure that I'm stitching through the backing, which means that I'm going to go up, you know, I don't know, about a ½ inch from the edge in this case. It doesn't have to be neat or small stitches for this step either. They won't show, don't worry about it. Oh, look how cute. Okay, now I'm going to secure this thread in the back underneath the edge of the fur here. I'll just, maybe I'll make a couple of back stitches right here. Just maybe 2 or 3 stitches on top of one another. That looks good. Okay, my favorite part is to blush the cheek, so I always save that for the end. It's kind of like my reward for finishing. So we just have a couple more steps. I have these cute little pink buttons, which I just think are the perfect touch, but I understand it might be a challenge for you to find, oh, these exact pink mother of pearl vintage buttons. I understand that. So this is just kind of like to inspire you, but you can put anything you like right there. Now I do want to remind you that even though I'm calling this baby's first Christmas or first Christmas ornaments or something like that, these are not for a baby. These are for the mom, you know, or the dad or the family for their Christmas tree when they have their first child or any child. Point is that this project is not actually for a baby to play with, right? That's all I want to say. So I'm sewing on the button. Again, I'm doing it by hand with a double strand of quilting thread. Just a couple of stitches there. And then I will secure my thread in the back. I'll do 2 French knots. And then a long tail. Now I have this needle threaded with pink baker's twine. And I'm going to use this for the hanging loop. Remember the seam allowance that sort of made a pom-pom inside the hat? I'm trying to stitch right through that little hard bit in there. I think I got it. And the baker's twine can also be used decoratively, like a little hat band and a bow right here. But still, you could do it around the neck, or, you know, a little bow instead of the button. Okay, there's our hanging loop. I like the pink baker's twine, and I'm going to use this pink baker's twine in this collection, in the Baby's First Christmas collection. And then finally, my favorite part is to add a little bit of blush for the cheeks. I know it looks really bright, but it does tend to kind of wear off. So I like to add it, you know, put too much on at first. And I'm going to say that this project is done. I'll show you a couple of, I've already showed you this one. It's almost the same. This one has the sweater cuff for a hat and the little French knots for the smile. And then the rest of them are just bigger. They were bigger, like I started off making the pattern too big, and I just kept making it smaller and smaller and smaller until finally I think this is the right size. Thank you for watching my tutorial. If you're enjoying my videos, please like, share, and subscribe.